So, you guys know how they say that possession's been done and there's no original way to do it? Enter this show. Hey guys, coming around for you for something that I think was one of my most anticipated new shows of the summer, without a doubt, and I'm sure you guys are looking forward to it as well. And it took me a while to review this, I'm sorry that it did, but that is for the series premiere of the new Cinemax show, Outcast, Season 1, Episode 1 of Darkness Surrounds Him. Now, I could not wait for this show, obviously. I mean, for many reasons. One, of course, because Robert Kirkman and the Walking Dead crew are doing this, and they have a lot more liberties, with this. There's nothing that they really need to limit. They can really go full on. This is Cinemax. They can do, it's TV mature, so they really can do anything that they want, and there's nothing they have to censor, and they don't have to worry about viewership either, because on cable networks, they don't really care about getting an audience. They just care about a show making money. That's really what they care about, and that show has quality. That's what I like about cable networks. They like that their shows have quality, and if their shows aren't as, have as much quality, they usually do cancel them, and I had a lot of faith in Outcast because of that, but also because it seemed like a very different show that I haven't really seen before, and I really did like seeing that kind of like Preacher, and thank God I checked out the first episode because I love this premiere. I think this was a fantastic first episode. It really just drew us into the show. We really understood what the show is going to be like. There's really nothing I've seen that's quite like this before, and that's something I really did love. There's this, unfamiliar territory with something like Outcast that I really do love, and I know it's also based in a comic, and a lot of people said stay close to that. But I think this was a really great first episode. It set up things perfectly. We got introduced to the characters. We know what's going on. But let's just get into this first episode. There's a lot to talk about, and right away we see how scary and just haunting the show is going to be, with what might be one of the most terrifying but impressive first scenes I've seen in a very long time. There are a couple things I think this first scene just gets so right. First off, there's the fact that I think a first scene should establish the show's tone. We should know exactly what we're getting into with a first scene. That's exactly what this does. Not only does it do that, but it means to scare us in this way that I didn't think it was going to do, because we did see something like this in one of the promos, but it's still scary. We see this young boy named Joshua Austin, and he's in his house and he's staring at a bug. But unlike you or me, he's not startled by it at all. In fact, he's kind of more intrigued by it, and he's looking at it intently, and he keeps scratching his hand. We don't really know what this means. He slams his head on it and kills it, and then literally eats the remains of it off his wall and leaves his face covered in blood. I mean, it really is a sight to see, but it really is crazy, and I think the most terrifying thing about it is that we don't really know what's going on, why he's doing this. He then hears two women arguing downstairs, and one of them says she's not letting her drive 6 countless times, or with somebody she doesn't even know for stealing his father's car 6 months ago. Joshua goes downstairs to see what all the chaos is about, obviously because there's two women arguing, and basically, make a long story short, you have two women, his mother, Betsy, and his sister, Mindy, and they're arguing because Mindy, I guess, has this guy that her mother doesn't approve of, and basically, Betsy says she's 16 years old. Mindy says she's older than she was when she was pregnant. Betsy says that does not make it okay for her to run wild. If anything, it means the opposite. She says she's trying to protect her, and Mindy says it's just a concert, and 6 of them are going to be there, and nothing is going to happen. Betsy says no. Mindy asks if she has any clue what this means to her. All her friends are going, and while Josh is listening, you just get the sense that something really scary is going to happen. You don't really know what's going on here. He listens, he opens the pantry and gets this bag of chips, and he starts munching on them. And alright, that seems okay. But obviously this kid's not normal because he ate a bug. No one just eats a bug like that. So he starts eating. He then puts down the bag. Mindy leaves. Betsy tells him to put away the chips, but then sees he's not eating the chips. He's biting away his own finger. It is really terrifying, but honestly really impressive. And the fact that the show didn't hold back, and the fact they showed this for their first scene, I really was impressed by. You can really tell we're going to some really, truly scary, weird territory, and the show is not at all afraid to do that. And when a show really just presents itself and is not afraid to show that, I gotta give it props for that. Yes, it was weird. Yes, it was disgusting, but that was the point. It was meant to be weird. It was meant to show you that the show is not going to be, it's not going to hold back. It's going to be graphic. It's not for the faint of heart, and I love that, because basically, if you're okay with that first scene, the rest of this episode is perfect, and I think it was very well done. A very good way to introduce us to the show. This isn't even our main character, it's just the character we have in this episode, and I love the way all that was done. Amazing stuff, and probably one of the most terrifying things I've seen in a while. So then we're introduced to 3 people who I think are going to be big characters on the show. We see the town of Rome, West Virginia. Here, a police report of a possible fire wait in progress at a main and park. Anyone in the area, please respond. Now, we don't know this about, but Chief Giles, while playing poker, hears a report, says the boys will get it, and asks the local Reverend Anderson where he is with the new playground equipment, and Anderson says not to distract him and says it's going well. Thanks him for coming to the park. Giles says it's a little of that makes a little of this okay. Isn't that how it works? Now, I haven't heard the name Giles since Buffy, so this was really cool as well, which, of course, was also a horror show, but that's really cool. We have Giles. I've just never heard it since then. So Anderson says whatever's motives, there would have been something missing without the Chief's chili, and Ogden says it would be heartburn, and Anderson says the point is they are almost to their goal, and the two are about to put them over the top. He hands over money, says he's going to make sure there's a little plaque with their names on the teeter-totter in honor of their generous contribution, Lord willing. And Giles asks Owen if he's got a read on that, and asks if it means he's got a terrible hand and needs help, or he's got a great hand and is bluffing. And Ogden says that's his answer, says to fold. Giles says he's not so sure, much as he hates disappointing kids, and says he wants him to show him his cards. Anderson says to quit wasting and give him the money, and a woman, Florence, then comes in. Anderson says that this better be important. She says that it's Betsy, who clearly Anderson knows, and she says it's urgent, and Giles says he's out since it's past time to call a night anyway, says his wife is going to be pissed, and that's all we get of Giles in this episode. But I think it's enough. We already kind of know who Giles is. We know he has a wife, obviously. We know he obviously gave all this money to Anderson. I'm sure we're going to see more of that as the show goes on. The show heavily implies that we are going to see these characters again, and I'm sure we will. And basically, she says, Joshua, he has to help him. He asks who it is. She says, it's just like he's been talking about on Sundays, like the Connors boy and Miss Martindale. And he asks if she's sure, and she says she is. So right away, we see what's going on. We see how Anderson is going to be tied to this, and basically we get what our main plot of the episode is going to be. But then we finally get introduced to our main character, who I think was a really great introduction. We see he's sleeping. We see our main character, Kyle Barnes. He's sleeping on the floor. He's got stuff scattered all over the place, and when I mean stuff scattered, there's stuff all over the place. There's like a bowl of like soup or something like that. There's like these books everywhere. There's a poster of something. I mean, it'd be a lot to just go back and say what everything is, but I feel like a lot of that, there's a reason why we're seeing those certain things. I don't really know what they all mean, but there's obviously something that ties into all that. I just don't really know what it is yet, so I do like seeing that. But he thinks back to a flashback when we think it's when his parents met. We realize later it's not. I'll get into what it actually is, but this is something else I really love. They take his time with his story. We don't really know what's going on with him, so the word outcast already is great for Kyle, because we already feel like an outcast to his character. We know absolutely nothing about him. He then hears a knock at the door, wakes up, goes to the door, but not before we see several more rooms with just as much junk in them. One of them containing this room with like a dress, and I don't really know what that means, but they showed it for a little bit, so I feel like that means something. And he then turns on a light. He sees a picture of his family, pours himself some cereal as the girl continues to knock at the door. He gets him in frustration, and he opens the door, and we realize that the woman is his sister Megan and tells her to go, and she says she won't leave his sorry ass all alone. He says she can't be here. She looks at the fridge and says it's worse than she thought. Asks him when was the last time he ate a vegetable, and as he remembers, solid poop, because apparently he doesn't even go to the bathroom, right, and because this isn't healthy, and he asks why she's here, and of course, again, we don't know what's going on then. We don't really know what she's talking about, but I couldn't help but listen because it was just so interesting. And she says she's checking him because she cares about him. He says things must be dull with her real family. She says she's not even going there with him. She asks why he didn't call her when he ran out of food. Was he out of minutes or something? He says he lost the phone. She asks if this is him pushing himself and tells him to take a shower, and he says he appreciates her judgment, but she can quit making him her mission. He's doing just fine. She doesn't owe him anything. And he doesn't come across an asshole in this scene. He comes across more as someone who doesn't really want any help, and basically, we eventually realize why that's happening. We'll get to that a little bit later, but she says to look at the place, says maybe his little savings account will last forever. She goes to the sink, realizes he still hasn't even had his water turned on, so clearly, I mean, he doesn't really give a shit, really, and he says he doesn't need it. She says it's bullshit. She doesn't owe him anything. He knows better, and he says it's his home, and she says to please let her get him some food and get him out of there for at least an hour. She says maybe they'll luck out and the place will burn down while they're gone. He says 1 hour, and then she will leave him alone. He does agree to that. And basically she tries to hug him, but he says not to. She says he'll meet him out front in 5 minutes. She goes out. He remembers when, and we get this really terrifying scene that was very well done. I love the way this was done. Just, again, really does show how great this show handles horror, as shown us in this next scene. This next scene not only I think is just as creepy as the opening, but it tells us pretty much everything we need to know about why Kyle is acting the way he is. I mean, not everything, but it's a really good start. We can really tell what's going on. We can tell what he's really hiding, why he's being very discreet, why he's kind of hid himself from everyone, and basically this next scene shows that. We see he thinks back to when his mother picked him up, basically, he was sitting at a kitchen table, and the picture you see is exactly what his mother looked like. You know, we don't see her face, her hair's, like, covering her face or whatever, and basically, he's sitting there, you know, just by himself at the kitchen table, and his mother comes up to him. It looks like she's gonna kiss him. She literally grabs him by the hair, drags him by the hair, locks him into a pantry, and we don't know what happened after that, but that's exactly what she did. She locked him into a pantry. It's really creepy, but very well done as well, because you can really tell this isn't all based on the scare. The scare is not, oh, his mother locked him into the pantry. The scare is that his mother was possessed, and he has no idea really what's going on, or what to do about it, or how he can get out of that pantry. I mean, you can tell really how this has traumatized Kyle. This is why he's the way he is today, and very well shows, really, you know, how we feel for this character, what's going on with him, and it really made me care about his character even more than I already did. So Anderson then arrives at the Austin house. Betsy greets him, asks if Joshua has changed, and of course he's not, and thanks him, he brings her coffee. Anderson says he has donuts too, but they didn't survive the drive over, obviously because he ate them, and he asks if he's awake, and she says she brought him some food this morning, but is unsure if he ate it, and says he scares her, and he says the Lord would have never been one of his children, and neither would he, and asks to see about him, and Megan then takes Kyle to the grocery store, Piggly Wiggly, and says they need to get more organic produce there, which, by the way, is a real store, I heard. Piggly Wiggly is a real place, basically, I guess, in West Virginia. But basically, he says she shouldn't have brought him there, and she says she doesn't know what she did to him to make him hate her so much, and he says he doesn't hate her, and she asks if he doesn't, why does he try to avoid her like the plague? Because obviously, he wants nothing to do with her, and she gets him a cell phone for the next time he needs something so he can call her, and I mean, it's so weird that he doesn't even have a cell phone. It's really interesting, and not the person he's not supposed to call. Now, we don't know who this is, but it's clearly a woman she doesn't want him to call, and we don't know who that is yet. So we find out a little bit later, but we don't know yet. He asks if her 12-year-old students notice her condescending tone, or if that's just him, and she says pretty much just him, and she says she doesn't want him to get in trouble again. Asks if that's so wrong, he says he won't call, and she asks what his suit preference is. He then sees two women talking that he clearly knows, one of them being Florence, and basically she tells him that her friend Lynn went to church with his mother, and asks if he remembers her, and he says it's been a long time, and it's good to see her, and she says that she hasn't seen him in church in a long time. He should really attend a sermon, and he says he'll try, and she says they're asking everyone in Rome to pray for Joshua and explain the situation, which is exactly what happened to Kyle's mother, we find out. She says to keep Joshua in his thoughts and prayers. She says she hopes she'll see him soon, and he says he'll try, and Megan thinks that the dark forces are fucking nonsense. You know, she doesn't believe a word of this, and, you know, she says his mother was sick, and some people in town are crazy. He starts to drift off, but then comes back to reality. Very interesting. We don't know what he was really thinking about, but clearly he was drifting off, and basically, you can tell that definitely there's something going on there. You just don't know what it is. So back at Joshua's house, Reverend Anderson struggles to calm a growling and possess Joshua. I mean, he's growling, he's possessed, he's flying around the room. It's like The Exorcist. His body's levitating. He kicks Anderson, his mother, in the head. Anderson holds him down, yells scripture at him, but to no avail. Betsy tries to get him to wake up, but nothing really seems to be working. It seems like there really is no way to save him. But Megan then drives Kyle back. He says he appreciates this. She asks if he's actually giving her gratitude, and he says to shut up. He talks about Joshua and asks if he's heard anything, and she says to not go down that road again. She remembers when he first moved in before her parents adopted him, and he thought that there were demons hiding in every shadow, and Anderson filled his head with what she sees as bullshit, and it's clear that Megan does not believe in all the paranormal and demonic stuff going on in the town. You know, she doesn't think it's all true. So, he says he's just worried about him, and she says there's not much he can do there. She then goes a different way to his house, and he asks if she's lost, and asks where he's taking her, and she says he's never seen the new house. It's been 2 years, and tells her he knows she doesn't want him around her daughter, and her husband hates him, and realizes that they're not going back to his house, they're going back to her house. So, basically probably because, you know, she actually has a good life, she has a husband, she has food, all the basic necessities that he needs that he hasn't focused on at all. Because clearly, you know, Kyle is not concerned about basic necessities. He thinks that he doesn't deserve them, pretty much. And he asks her why. She says she knows how he feels about him. She says it's just one dinner. He asks if she really thinks he's stable, and she can't, basically... Oh, I read this wrong. So... she says he doesn't hate them enough to basically jump in front of a moving car, and she'll take that as a win. Her husband, Mark, then comes home, sees Kyle, explains Megan brought him home again against his will, and he doesn't want to be there. Mark then sees Megan and Holly says that Kyle is there. He says he knows that he saw him with his own eyes, and obviously he wants to talk to Megan alone. So he asks her why. She says she knows how he feels about him. She says it's just one dinner. He asks if she really thinks that he's stable, and she can't tell him she feels safe around him, and it's not a good idea to bring him around their daughter. And she says he's in there, and she's somewhere else, and he asks if it's not going to be awkward for him to eat alone. He says he knows what Kyle did for him when she was younger, and they can never thank him enough for that, which we don't know what he did, but clearly he did something. We just don't know what it is yet, but he took a turn when he got older, and she can't ignore that and forgive him for what he did. And she says that he made a mistake and he did a horrible, unforgivable thing, but he's paid for that. It's ruined his life, and she wants to be there for him. And she asks if he thinks he's gonna attack Holly over the dinner table. And we don't know where this came from, but randomly they start bringing this up, and she says it's just for one night. He's not gonna hurt anybody, and says to please let her do something nice for him because he has nothing. And that's what I like about Megan's character, is despite the fact that she does not believe in all this paranormal stuff, she wants to help him because he is her stepbrother. And Kyle then looks at, and she feels he does deserve some sort of gratitude for what he did. So Kyle looks at one of Holly's books, sees her, and asks if she remembers him, and Holly says he hurt his little girl and now he's not her father anymore. He tries to deny it, but immediately he storms out, and you can tell that he doesn't want to remember this pain, but now he is remembering the pain and starts to cry. Holly then goes to Megan, asks what's wrong. Holly says that Kyle left. He didn't just get up, he actually left, and Megan goes outside to look for him. She asks Mark why he'd leave, and he says he's sure he'd fine. They get a patrol car, have them pick him up, and drive him home, and she says to let him walk because all he ever wants is to be alone. Kyle is then back in his messy house. He hears a truck outside, sees groceries and water delivered him, including the cell phone that Megan brought for him, basically because she wants him to have this stuff. She wants him to eat, she wants him to drink, she wants him to have those things that he needs. And basically, he decides to call someone. He calls his ex-wife, we realize, and she answers but says nothing. She asks if it's him, but then hangs up, tells her daughter Amber to come outside, and basically we are under the impression that he hurt his daughter, and it's really crazy to think about, but that's what it seems like, that he did hurt his daughter, and that's something that he was, I guess, under the same thing that Joshua was, and he just didn't remember it. That's what it seems they were going. That's what it seems like was going to happen, and that's what it seems like this was all about. That is basically what was going to happen, is that he didn't want to that he hurt his daughter and he has no recollection. I think that's really interesting, but we've seen that before. We eventually find out more is going on, which we'll get into. So Kyle then hangs up, he destroys the phone, he throws it out of the window, and he goes to visit, not Giles, it's not who it is. It's actually this guy named Norville, his neighbor, and asks if the offer is still good to borrow his car, and he says sure. He drives to the Austin house. Betsy asks who he is, and he says he heard about Joshua and asks if Anderson is there. Betsy goes to greet him, and Anderson answers the door and is surprised to see him. He says he knows it's been a long time, and Anderson says he didn't know he was back in town. Kyle says it's been 5 months now, and Anderson says he wishes that they were seeing each other under different circumstances, but he's glad he's there. He leads him upstairs, and obviously, we know why he's there. He's there to help out Joshua. Kyle says he didn't come to see the boy, but doesn't know what the reason was, and Anderson says he does, leads him to see Joshua, and he says the doctors think he should be in therapy, but they know what it is, and he says they don't know anything. Anderson says whatever he thinks happened to his mother, it was him who stopped it, and Kyle says his mother was sick, and he doesn't know anything else about it. To Kyle, that's what it was, that she was just sick, and basically, he says since he was just a kid at the time, Anderson says that these things are everywhere and all around him. He's been gone a long time and has no idea how bad it's gotten, and he may not believe it, but that doesn't make it any less true because it's clearly going on. This isn't, Anderson clearly does believe in it, and it clearly is going on. Megan is just kind of denying it because I think she just wants a more logical, plausible answer. So Kyle says to stick to what they know before they start blaming the boogeyman again. And then we get what is one of the most terrifying possession scenes I have seen probably since The Exorcist, or even The Conjuring is in this next scene. Nowadays, it is hard to make a horror show scary. I mean, there's been so many gimmicks done before. It seems like, we've seen it all. But this really shows that we haven't. And this really did feel like a movie scare. It really was terrifying. Anderson leads him to Joshua's room, tells Kyle that Joshua is showing signs of very animal-like behavior, which is common. He goes up to Joshua, says he knows him, and Kyle asks when the last time he went to school was, and says it must be cool getting to skip on school like this. And he's basically talking to Joshua as if he was a kid, because that's who Joshua is. He's a kid, and Joshua says that he likes school and says that he misses his friends. Kyle says he's sure they miss him too, and basically tells him to stop all this so things go back to normal because he's scaring his mom and wasting Anderson's time, and tells him to stop pretending. And Anderson says he hasn't been speaking like this before. This is new, and, this is something he hasn't seen before. And Joshua says he's all grown up. He barely even fits in that pantry now, and we realize that he's talking about Kyle. So clearly this isn't Joshua. There's obviously a demon inside of him. Kyle asks what he's talking about, and Joshua says padlocked on the door. He used to draw pictures on the wall. The picture we saw was something he drew on the wall in the pantry, we realize, and asks if he remembers. Kyle says he's talking nonsense. Joshua again says he knows him, and Kyle asks what he knows and does he have any idea what he's talking about with all that, and he says he's just a kid and he doesn't know shit. Joshua says we all know what we know, and I love the fact that Kyle is actually scared in this scene. You can tell he's actually scared of what this is. He knows it's just a little boy. It's a demon, and Anderson lights a candle, tries to stop him. Joshua then tackles him, seems to suck part of Kyle's soul out of his mouth, and he then flashes back to his mother doing the exact same thing to him as a boy, and they separate them, and it's just terrifying to think about. I mean, the fact that this boy is possessed and everything, we've seen this stuff before, but the way that's connected to Kyle and knows of this stuff about him, we don't really know what's going on there. It's very interesting. I cannot wait to see what else is going on and how this demon is connected to Kyle as it shows in this scene. So Anderson then separates them. Kyle goes outside to catch his breath. Anderson tries to give him a car, but Kyle refuses it and asks if Joshua ever tried to do that to him, because obviously there was a reason why this is happening, and he wants to know that, it's not just related to him. I think Kyle knows, but he wants to not, he wants to deny that this is just about him. And Anderson says that demons are tricksters. They want you to fear them more than they do, but with God on their side, they have nothing to fear. That's the mentality that Anderson has. And Anderson says his mother and Joshua aren't the only ones that have been affected. There's a house like this one in every town, in every country, this whole wide world, and he goes into those houses, and Kyle tells him to run. That's the best thing to do, which we can clearly see that Kyle's done. He's clearly ran away from this, and, while he still has something left. Anderson says that there was a time he might have taken that advice, and he wasn't always the gung-ho holy warrior as he's before him. He served God tending his flock, but he questioned them. Then he went to his house and saw the devil was real, and he didn't question anymore. He knew his path was clear. He didn't think it was a coincidence. He set him on that path, and now walking in himself, facing all this again, he doesn't believe he's going to run. Anderson then he doesn't believe he's going to run. Now he knows it's real, and, Kyle needs to embrace as well. He needs to face the fact that this is real and that this is happening and that he can't really stop it. So Anderson then goes to visit a man named Caleb, who asks him if he's working late. Caleb says that the railing was loose and he didn't want any of the elders falling. He also says he noticed his screen door is coming off, and he might want him to get a new one before he paints it. Anderson says he can hold off for another year. The money will be spent in better things than a good house. Caleb then leads him to it and shows him that someone has paint. It's really weird, actually, what someone does. Someone's painted, basically, this picture, and it says, like, Satan lives or something like that. It's really weird overall, the way that was done, but basically that's exactly what's happened. Someone has done this thing called Satan Lives, and he says to leave it. Like, he literally says, let's just leave it. He doesn't want to get rid of it. So I think that's very interesting overall. So Kyle then visits his comatose mother in the hospital. He remembers her abusing him as a child, because obviously he went through a lot of that. And he then returns Norville's card. They discuss loss over dinner. Norville expresses his regrets about he and his wife's inaction over Kyle's abuse as a child, and really how they didn't realize what was really going on. To them, they just thought it was hard discipline, but they didn't realize the beast in his mother. They didn't realize what was really going on, and I like the relation between these two. I'm looking forward to seeing more of Norville. I like his concern for Kyle, and Kyle says that Allison was his wife, the only person that he ever truly knew him, and Norville assures him he's there for whatever he may need. And we know obviously something happened between Kyle and Allison. We don't really know what it was, but Kyle then goes to Anderson, thanks him for the ride, and Kyle sees a picture, asks if that's his son, and Anderson says that his name is Matthew, and he could always use a hand with meals if he got the time, and Kyle says he's not that good with people. Anderson says he held up in that house 5 months in town without showing his face, and asks if it's because of what happened to his mother, and if he thinks he caused it, and Anderson says he wasn't around Joshua, and it still happened to him. So it has nothing to do with Kyle. He's trying to assure him, you're not the reason this is happening, but obviously, the demon inside Joshua is contacting Kyle, so there's something definitely going on there. We just don't really know what's going on yet, and Kyle obviously doesn't either. And that's something I like, is that we're in as much denial as Kyle is. In many shows, they tell us what's going on, but this show, it doesn't. Kyle says that, what if he's right? Anderson asks why he's coming with him, and Kyle says he's there to find answers. Anderson asks if that's why he came back to Rome, and says he heard he has a family, and things are going good for him. Kyle says maybe he just missed the house. It's clear he doesn't want to talk about what happened with his family. But then they go back to the Anderson house to see Joshua, but this time with a plan, and we basically see what ends up happening in this next scene, which is utterly terrifying, but also utterly satisfying, and just really well done overall. So obviously the last time it did not work, Kyle was attacked, but this time he goes with a plan, because he uses the knowledge that he had with his mother and applies that to what's going on with Joshua. Because Joshua says he's very brave to return. Kyle then throws open the curtain, and the boy recoils from the light. He and Kyle tussle again, forcing Kyle to, they both begin levitating, and Kyle continues to punch him, because that's what he did to his wife. When basically what happened with his mother, he had to do that. So Joshua bites him, but his blood clearly burns Joshua. Kyle squeezes more blood on him. Joshua finally seems subdued, and he says that the Great Merge cannot be stopped before vomiting black slime onto the ceiling. Really interesting. It kind of reminded me of The Exorcist with like the green slime. So the goo coagulates and disappears, and Joshua is back. He's now a boy again. Kyle's cuffed by the police, but Chief Giles, and basically he's a boy again. Everything seems to be okay, and Kyle was able to save him, which I think was incredible. I love the way that was done. Very satisfying overall. But then we see Chief Giles lets him go because Joshua's mother refuses to press charges. Mark, who already considers Kyle a child abuser, is completely dumbfounded. He thought that Kyle wouldn't get off, but he did in fact get off, and he's really pissed that he did. So Anderson then drives him back home, asks if he got the answers he was looking for, and Kyle says some. Obviously, he didn't get all the answers or else the show would be over, so he only has some answers. And Anderson says he's seen a lot, though. He's seen the worst suffering a man could ever imagine, but that was unlike anything he'd ever seen before. And what it was like with his mother in the end, and Kyle says it was different with her, it wasn't like that, or with his wife, and he always thought it was something he did to them. It seems that they've been coming after him his whole life, and he gets out of the car and thanks him, and he knows that definitely something is going on, and that is when we get the incredible reveal at the end of this episode. This was perfectly well done, because like I said, up to this point, it seemed like Kyle, was a demon, that he had a demon inside him that he couldn't control and that he doesn't remember it, but that's not what's going on at all. He looks at his hand and then he flashes back to him coming home, and we realize that that guy we saw in the beginning was not his parents, it was him before he went into hiding, and he finds a possessed Allison attacking their daughter, proving Kyle's falsely accused, and that is how the episode ends. Kyle is, he is not the one that did it, it was Allison that did it. That's how the episode ends. Amazing stuff overall, absolutely incredible ending, and now let's get more into the show. One quick thing, though, guys, I did forget to say is at the very end after this flashback, he does say that he's going to let the demons come get him, and that is how we ended. But overall, guys, an amazing first episode. I really loved it overall. But in this show in general, there's so much to really get into between the cast and the music and just everything that, the score, the cinematography. There's so much to love about this show. But let's just get into more of what I loved about the show. Not just this episode, but the show in general, what I'm looking forward to. Starting off with the cast, of course. Now, obviously, it shouldn't come as a surprise when I tell you that Patrick Fugit gives an amazing performance in this show. I mean, he definitely steals the show from everyone else. There's so much good stuff about his performance as Kyle. The fact that Kyle thinks that, he's blaming himself, the fact that he's shutting himself out from everyone, not because he hates anyone or that he has anything against anyone, is that he feels he deserves it. He feels that he's uncontrollable and that no one should be around him, and that he's going to self-destruct at any point. It's such an interesting character, and there's so much stuff going on in his past. I can't wait to see what's going on there. I loved his character in this. I thought he did a great job, and really he was just fantastic, especially in those scenes where you can tell he's having these visions. There's a lot of stuff he doesn't want to remember, but it's coming back to resurface, and it's very sad to see, but I love the way his performance is. I think he did a great job, and definitely he without a doubt steals the show from everyone. Although everyone else is really great too, he definitely is the best. The other character I really love from this show was Philip Glenister as Anderson. I really do love this character overall. The way that he's taken his whole life, to discover what's going on, how to stop demonic possessions, is really interesting overall, and I like the teaming up between these two. I'm looking forward to seeing more of that. I'm looking forward to seeing what's going on with his character, and maybe get more into his past, because I feel like we're going to at some point, and I can't wait to see what's going on there. Very interesting overall, and I really did love what his character did, as well as Ren Schmidt as Megan. I mean, clearly she doesn't believe what's going on. I feel like definitely that's all going to come to haunt her. I feel like she definitely is very soon going to realize that what she thinks isn't real is in fact real, and she needs to realize that it's real and stop, pretending that it's not. I think it's going to be very interesting to see what happens there, and I can't wait to see the way that all plays out. And then as far as everyone else goes, characters like Mark and Giles, I'm sure are going to be really great. They just didn't really have their moment yet, but they already are really good. I like what we saw them in this episode. They did a very good job. And the directing here, I think, is fantastic with Robert Kirkman. Like I said, they have a lot more liberties here to stick with the source material and not have to cut things out and not censor anything. And I think it's one of the reasons why the show is so good. It is disgusting at times. It is really gross. It is very scary. And it's a good thing that's scary. It's very hard to be scary nowadays, and this show is scary. It scared me several times, and I'm very happy that it did that because I enjoyed it more because of that. But the show also is immensely entertaining, and that's something else that I really enjoyed. Even though it is scary, it's very entertaining. You can't help but watch. And the screenplay, not the screenplay, the writing here, I always say that, it's a TV show. The writing here is so interesting. I love the writing in this show. It's so interesting. I love that we're focused mainly on story and not just on this demonic possession. There's a lot more going on besides that. I really do love that, because if they were to focus just on demonic possession, that'd be fine, but I think the story is really what makes it seem like it's original. It makes it really seem like something special, and that's something I really do love, is the way the story's done. I can't wait to see the way that plays out. The score here, it's so eerie, and it's just perfect. The cinematography is amazing to the show. I mean, it looks like a movie. It really does. I haven't seen this good cinematography in a horror show since Penny Dreadful. I love the way cinematography was done here. I mean, Preacher, yes, it's great, but Preacher's more of a fun show, while this is more the serious dark show, and you got two great horror shows for the summer, definitely, that I can recommend. Preacher and Outcast, they're both fantastic. Overall, guys, I love this premiere. I cannot wait to see the next 9 episodes. I really think this is going to become one of my favorite shows of the summer. Maybe one of my favorite shows of the year. I love this show. It's scary, it's different, and that's one of the reasons why I love it. But let me know what you guys saw this first episode. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. I absolutely love this first episode. There's obviously a lot to get into with this first episode, and there's definitely gonna be a lot going on in the show, like, what happened with Allison, why'd she hide this from him, was she really possessed, things like that. That's really things I'm wondering about. But I will see you guys in my next video, which will be for tonight's episode of Game of Thrones, which obviously I can't wait for, and I will see you guys for that. Okay, bye.